Hey guys, Dan here. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly share my condolences to the people affected by the recent arson incident at Kyoto Animation Studio in Japan that happened recently. As an avid fan of the studio and of anime in general, this is obviously a heartbreaking tragedy that's rocked myself and the anime community, as well as the people of Japan, and of course, it's a far bigger pain for those who have sadly gotten hurt or lost loved ones in the fire. If you wish to help out the folks in Japan, I've got a link to the GoFundMe page that was set up by Sentai Filmworks in the description down below, as well as a link to KyoAni's online store. So if you could check them out, send a little their way, especially in these really, really dark times for the company and for the workers themselves. That would be great. And even if you can't leave a donation or purchase an item, just sharing these links around would be obviously a lot welcome. So please give them a shout out if you can. Again, my heart goes out to those affected by this needless tragedy that did not need to happen. And above all else, I just wish all the best to the studio, the animators, and everyone else hurting right now. So yeah. Thank you for listening. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and I'm here to finally give you my thoughts on RWBY's latest side project venture with the series' first ever novel, RWBY After the Fall. After making its mark in video games and manga, RWBY has now turned its attention to exploring other tales and characters beyond the main story. And they kicked off in an exciting way, with the centerpiece of this new experience getting to finally see what everyone's favorite caffeinated quattro, Team Coffee, have been up to since the fall of Beacon. Aided by Miles and Kerry, the main writer for this book was award-winning young adult writer E.C. Myers, whose past works include Fair Coin and The Silence of Six, and it was up to him to make this read not just a thrilling story on its own merits, but also a fitting piece of the overall RWBY puzzle that entertains fans of the series as well as newcomers. Not exactly an easy task, but did I feel it accomplished its goals? Was it a worthwhile story, or a failed attempt to expand the world of Remnant and some of its cast? Well, let's talk about it. Now, I will be discussing spoilers as well as some of the new character and world details in the second section of this video, with the shorter first section focusing on my non-spoilery comments on the book. I'll give you guys fair warning when I will start the spoiler stuff, and hopefully you will give both sections a listen to best understand my full opinion. Just to be safe though, please don't watch this video if you haven't seen up to the most recent episode as of this posting. Also, please remember that this is just my opinion. Obviously, I hope you guys will give this a read for yourselves to gain your own thoughts, and you're more than welcome to share them in the comments down below. With that being said, let's kick it off with quickly discussing the book's presentation, since there are a few visual tidbits that I liked which I wanted to touch on briefly. For example, this pretty solid front cover. The fact that it's all shiny helps the book catch anyone's eye on a bookstore shelf, even if you ignore the few dinks that my copy got during its long travel to get to me. Also, the mix of orange and goldish yellow colors for the background references the story's desert location in a simple enough way to make sure that the characters still stand out the most. And while the four are in rather generic poses, their expressions telegraph a noteworthy side of each member's personality, which gets explored through the course of the book. You got Coco's cocky smile befitting a confident leader, then you have Fox's sharp battle-ready focus, which has more going on once you know more about him. Meanwhile, the often composed Yatsuhashi has a cautious but fierce glare, and though Velvet's face isn't really perfect considering the position and angle of the eyes, her soft yet curious wonder still gives off the vibe of a kind-hearted individual who's got an alert mind. There's also a tiny appearance from Team RWBY reflected in Coco's sunglasses, a hint of the team still being a presence in the story through the book's many flashbacks, which detailed Team Coffee's formation, their interactions with the other students and teachers, and other events set during the show's first 3 volumes. On the note of these flashbacks, I also quite like the stylistic choices for these segments. Each trip down memory lane are sectioned off by RWBY's rose petals. Each chapter also starts with a silhouette of a coffee member or of Beacon Academy, signaling who or where is the center of focus, and all of this does a good job of alerting the reader to the switch to past and present events without it being too distracting or out of place. But that's enough about the book's visuals. Despite that iconic phrase that we all know, we do still need to judge the book by its contents. So let's dive into discussing the story. It's been more than a year since Team Coffee left Beacon for Shade Academy in Vacuo, where they've been continuing their huntsman training in the hopes of being better prepared to stop any repeats of what happened to their former school and their friends. But when a mysterious distress call coming from the desert asks for help, we get to see Coco, Fox, Velvet, and Yatsuhashi have to deal with not just the dangers of their new home, but also some shady goings-on that push them physically, mentally, and beyond their own personal conflicts. God, I need a drink. Now, I do want to start off this non-spoilery discussion of the story with a few negatives that I do have. For one, I did feel the book was front-loaded with explanations of common RWBY terms like aura, semblances, and whatnot in a short space of time. They are small in their explanation, so it's not too distracting, but the overabundance of these moments during the opening chapters can take you out of the immersion just a little, though I understand this is probably only a complaint if you're not a newbie. I'm just saying that maybe they could have been better spread out across the book. There were also a couple of times where conversations lacked variety in the wording as the dialogue switched from person to person, and that can lead to some tedium. The first thing I want to praise though is how well this book was able to make me feel the strain of being in Vacuo. The World of Remnant episode focused on the Southwestern Kingdom made it pretty clear that it's not exactly what you would call a lovely place for a summer holiday, with its rough climate, barren lands, and constant dangers that make surviving there feel like a badge of honor you don't even want. But the book's world building for this previously untouched kingdom was very compelling, and it did a great job at further expanding its unique elements in many ways. For example, I adore that some of the everyday wildlife could actually be more deadly than the grim. The opening prologue features a battle with Team Coffee and a swarm of giant mole crabs that were quite the challenge even for these highly skilled second-year students, and it says a lot about the difficulties of living here that those who do are so desperate for food that they consider mole crabs rare delicacies worth hunting. And that's rare not because they're hard to find, more so they're hard to kill. The nomads of Vacuo have also given nicknames to certain weather and desert-related ailments, such as Misery's Kiss for sunstroke and Sudden Demise for giant sinkholes. Almost like they've accepted larger than average amounts of sickness and death is a natural part of living here. It's morbidly tragic, yet boy does it build up character for a kingdom. This is a harsh, unforgiving land that is the perfect place to hide away from the world, and yet it's almost a death sentence waiting to happen. It's extremely fascinating in its rugged nature, and so too are the people who live in it. They tough it out and make do with eating bats, worms, geckos, and a whole lot of sand just to make it through another day. Still better than my cooking at least. Oh dear lord! Of course, this is all new territory for most of the coffee lot, and I was overjoyed that each of them came out of this book a stronger character. Myers truly did put in a great amount of effort to make sure each coffee member finally evolved from notable minor face to an expanded, engaging character worthy of their own adventures, complete with their own quirks, backstories, and motivations, with really only one of them lacking a little in terms of insight on their past compared to their teammates. Either way, all 4 of them gel well with each other no matter which members are in the spotlight, and I can instantly understand that this is a chemistry that's been built up over time through highs and lows. Thanks to some of the flashbacks, we find out that things weren't instantly perfect. There were hurdles at the team's infancy, including one major incident which I cannot discuss without spoilers, trust me. And even now, they aren't without flaws. Yet you see them try to overcome these complications because after everything they've gone through, not just recently but over the course of their lives, they really do care for each other like a second family, and I truly bought into that bond thanks to the colourful interactions they share amongst themselves and with the novel's solid supporting cast. I should also mention my joy that thankfully the Coffee Gang scenes with Team RWBY in the flashbacks never felt as jarring as say some of the scenes in The Lion King 1.5 with how Timon and Pumbaa were planted into those established scenes. Each interaction offered something worthwhile, felt natural to the timeline of the known events, and they went some way into benefiting a few of the motivations that affects the Coffee members in present day. Not to mention Myers managed to capture the same energy and charm of the already established cast fantastically well, so massive props there. And I think the elements tied to the group's mission was extremely well done. Again, without going into spoilers just yet, it did more than enough to stand apart from the series' grander story of relics, gods, and immortals by just simply telling a self-contained story about emotions, taking responsibility, and surviving together. And it came off as a very fitting tale for a world like Remnant, where even tiny emotions can often lead to your death. The mystery that surrounds this tale definitely caught me by surprise at numerous points as well, when I thought that I could see where the story was going. And though yeah, a few things were kind of obvious, the twist that they did have still managed to hit their target. Also, as a fan, I did enjoy some of the little sly references and in-jokes, from quoting the iconic "It's also a gun" to mocking Jean's decision to go into the clearly dangerous cave in the initiation, to, I swear, a reference to Weiss getting impaled in Volume 5. Even the music that RWBY is often celebrated for gets a passing mention. The good news is that just like with the flashbacks, they all come very natural to this story. It's there for the fans of this series to get a small smirk at, but for the fresh-faced reader with no prior knowledge of the series, they will either fly over your head without anything being lost, or it still lands a good laugh or two as part of the overall scene. Finally, I gotta give my props to how well Myers was able to write the fights in a way that captured the style and flair the RWBY series is known for, without being too overly descriptive for the sake of detailing the high-octane moves and sequences. And I was able to get a good visualization of what's going on, only feeling lost and confused when the characters are feeling the same. Purposeful situations like that made me fully immersed in the events taking place, and considering this was one of my biggest fears heading into the book, this is something that I'm over the moon to say was one of the book's many positives. So that's about it for the non-spoilery discussion. If you haven't read the book yet and want to avoid spoilers, then jump to this time in the video to get right to my final thoughts. Last chance. Okay? Well then. Welcome to the spoiler section, folks. We got a lot to discuss, so let's start off by having a quick breeze through some of the notable new information that this book delivered before we get into the nitty-gritty. Thanks to a pretty neat addition of Beacon's schedule pre and post the Vital Attack, we got full names and classes for some of the unknown Academy staff, including the forever off-screen Professor Peach, who teaches plant science and is revealed to be based on Thumbelina, given that it's her first name, while Professors Harold Mulberry and Anne Green both teach weapon crafting and stealth and security respectively. The current fate of these three is unknown, but we do get to see Glinda again, which is a treat for those of us who have been wishing she makes a return in the show someday. She's currently serving as acting headmistress, though she's largely just helming the defending of Vale from the Grim Swarms, and she's the one who gave Team Coffee the backing to be let into Shade Academy, which is home to Professor Rumple, obviously based on Rumpelstiltskin, and the headmaster, Professor Theodore, who continues the trend of Academy headmasters being based on Wizard of Oz characters, though which one exactly is unknown. Despite being a male, he could be based on the Wicked Witch of the West, who in some media is named Theodora. Or it could be Dorothy, as Theodore is the gender swap version of that name. We also got confirmation that yes, Roy Stallion is dead, though the fate of his Team Bronze brethren, Bronze, Noling and May, are only presumed dead. At least they live on in Amity Arena. And from Vacuo, we not only got the theme of the village names being based on minerals and rocks, we also got a boatload of new Grimm. There's Ravager Bats, a venom-spitting camel named a Dromedion, a Jackalope Grimm with strong hind legs and bony antlers, a freaky beast in the form of a 3-headed, 5-story tall giraffe Grimm known as a Ziraf, and finally, a blind worm, a giant worm with a red eye, acid blood, and spiked teeth, which could be based on the Mongolian death worm, something that I'd love to see be confirmed since that was my number 2 most wanted Grimm. See my countdown video for more on that. All of these were wicked new Grimm additions, and I love the idea that this desert kingdom has beasts that are unlike that of Vale's woodlands, especially since we now know Atlas is set to have Grimm based on Ice Age creatures. Oh god, no, wrong Ice Age! But let's get back on track now by going over how I felt about each of the coffee guys and how they were handled, beginning with the feisty leader, Coco Adele, spelled for some reason with an extra E in her last name. Seriously, was this always a thing? Because I could have sworn there's only one. Anyway, next to Velvet, Coco's the other coffee member that we've already gotten to know a decent amount, with her confident swagger shining on and off the battlefield and her penchant for style equaled only by the destruction from her Gatling gun, Gyanduja, and the explosive dust shots that get power boosted by her semblance codenamed Hype. Fun fact, Gyanduja comes from an Italian chocolate spread, so in a way, Coco is fighting monsters with Nutella. While Coco's arc does follow similar beats that Ruby and Jean had to follow, as such as taking responsibility for your team and trying to avoid your missteps affecting your squad, I did enjoy seeing how Coco's pride was often her biggest enemy, as a fighter and as a leader. Thus she looked to other capable leader figures for inspiration, including Slate, the mayor of the tough nomad tribe that may make you think she's just the token old lady of this story on the back of Maria's appearance in the main show, but she trades Maria's eccentricness for a snarky yet grounded heart. Though her importance in the grand scheme of things does peter out as the book goes on, she was still a satisfying guide for the team and a mentor for Coco, teaching the young leader how to listen and not let her habit of trying to be the best come at the cost of overlooking the needs of her squad. And since I couldn't dare discuss Coco without mentioning this notable revelation, yep, Coco is indeed a lesbian, with the book mentioning her reputation for being a heartbreaker to the girls at Faras Academy, and she gains a crush on another new face, Carmine Escalados, a stunning and deadly pro-huntress that first appeared in Amity Arena, and the pair's flirting is quite entertaining. I even like the fact that Coco is a bit of a silent pervert, having a thing for miniskirts and liking the idea of Carmine wearing the school uniform of her home kingdom, Atlas. It plays off well with her own alluring nature and her habit of scoping out people at first glance from behind her shades. Plus it feels more accurate to the kind of crush someone her age would have, compared to say Pyrrha's slowly blooming pure crush on Jean. If I did have any complaint about this plot point though, it would be feeling like there should have been more interactions with just Coco and Carmine before the final third, to make a bigger impact on the events that transpire there. Switching now to the only native Vacuan of the squad, we then have Fox Alistair. Prior to the book, Fox was easily the least explored member of the team, having had no speaking lines, only getting one fight under his belt, and the most attention he had being around his rumored blindness, which was eventually confirmed in Amity Arena. So I, for one, was definitely excited to see what the book could do to help shed some light on what kind of character Fox is. And that intrigue shot up greatly when Miles said, "You guys are gonna love Fox," during the novel's reveal. That was quite the statement, but sure enough, he was spot on, as I do think Fox is After the Fall's MVP. The guy was a constant source of sarcastic and laid-back humor, even feeling comfortable enough with his blindness to make light of it, which leads to many playful comments and conversations, especially with Coco. Their partnership offers the most fun through their back and forth teasing, though this doesn't come from any romantic feelings, more so a strong mutual respect, which I admire. Also, the dude's tonfa blades are called Sharp Retribution. You know someone has to have a good sense of humor when they name their weapons something that edgy and they're not some sort of cliche emo character. We also got to find out his semblance, which ties into his lack of speaking lines in the past. Turns out, the guy has telepathy, which he uses to mentally speak with people he makes a connection with so long as they are within range. And though he uses this often in battle for easy team chatter, he mainly uses it as his primary source of communication. Fox can speak normally, however, he chooses to speak through his telepathy, largely to make the moments he does verbally speak have weight and purpose. You know whatever he says are his truest feelings or is important when he does this. And I think that's a wicked personal touch that adds some rare personality and non-combative elements to a semblance, as well as adding some unique color to most of the conversations that Fox is involved in. In terms of how his blindness is addressed as well, Fox has high-level skill with his aura, which helps him track other people or rebalance himself, but his best aid comes from a tiny earpiece he has from Atlas called the Accessibility Dialogue Assistant, or ADA for short, which uses sonar to create an artificial sight. This isn't the first time that we've seen ways that those with physical disabilities in Remnant can gain technology to aid them. But I think this is probably one of my favorites, as it's not something that's just making regular life easier, it's also tech that's designed with the user being a huntsman in mind, like Yang's new arm, as Ada also has a combat protocol that scans enemy weaponry and fighting skills, and this comes into play beautifully well during his fight with Carmine's partner, Bertolac Celadon, with Fox having to fight without it in already dangerous circumstances. But what really sealed the deal for me liking Fox as a character is the emotional layers found in his past. Growing up as an orphan from the Kinete tribe, his parents having died in a sinkhole accident, the rest of his tribe sadly saw him as frail due to his blindness and the survival of the fittest mindset most Vacuans have, except for his uncle Copper, who I think is based on the dog of the same name from The Fox and the Hound, given his ties to R. Fox. Copper raised him and trained him until his death following an attempted theft, and it's this that inspired Fox to leave this environment where life can be lost on a whim and learn how to protect those who can't defend themselves. It's an easy to grasp backstory that instantly made me feel sympathetic for the guy, especially when all he ever wants is to live a happy life with people who don't look at him and think that he's weak, and he won't let his disability stop him from making sure he doesn't lose anyone else that he cares about. Simple, engaging, and it makes Fox come off more as just the self-admitted comic relief of his team. Next up, it's the fullness that started it all for this team, the one and only Velvet Scarlatina. Now, I've got a bit of a soft spot for this character, so you may be surprised to hear me say that one of my biggest letdowns of After the Fall is tied to Velvet and her lack of backstory depth, especially compared to the lad that we just talked about. What we got for her overall was still very good, and I got a lot to praise for her content. I just wish that there was more that we got to learn about her origins beyond her just being in the same training school as Coco. To know what made her want to be a huntress in the first place and what life she had before going to Beacon. Still, she is the heart of not just her team, but also the novel in my eyes, continuing her past examples of being adorable as heck, and as well being a delightful saint to those in need, all the while dealing with some demons of her own. Her arc centers on Velvet trying to prove her worth after constantly being seen as the weak link in her team, especially when Coco tends to coddle her a little too much and not allow Velvet to get a chance to get a word in or take a bigger role in plans. It even affects her struggles with dealing with the pain of the fall of Beacon and the use of her camera and Isidora. With every weapon copy Velvet uses, a photo with its original user is gone forever. And in this period of uncertainty over the fates of those they care about, Velvet's hesitant to use these copies, despite her desire to not hinder her team. She doesn't want to lose those special memories tied to these photos, but she can't accept that she may never see them again if they're not already dead, and this results in Velvet's capabilities shrinking to the point that her teammates have to work around her limitations, causing more instances of being unable to help out in ways that she would prefer. Few weapons in the series have that much emotional baggage to their use, and every activation feels important. The good news is, this struggle that she's in doesn't result in Velvet being benched, as she does still fight with weapons she knows she can still take pictures of. And beyond that, some of her biggest contributions come from how well she handles matters outside of fighting. Through her investigation of the mood bombs that have been affecting the tribe, as well as her motivation and inspiring of Gus Caspian, the book does a brilliant job at touching on more of Velvet's personality beyond her shy side. Yes, she is a timid sort, especially when it comes to being attacked for her race, which does get touched on in the flashbacks. But once she's in her element, her playful sassy side and understanding kindness comes forward. And I'm glad Myers was able to show that he can explore a character's self-doubt without it holding them back from expressing themselves elsewhere. I'm even glad that despite accepting the risks of using weapon copies in the future and saving Coco from being worm food, she still has to deal with following Coco's orders over her own wishes, though for good reason this time. She still gained a huge personal victory that she can be proud of as she starts to grow more and more confident. Plus, it acts as an example that the Four's growth doesn't stop with just this novel. They can still continue their arcs in future stories and grow more as people and as fighters in those stories. I just hope with those new challenges for Velvet, we get to see some deeper clarity on her background next time. And finally, we have the gentle giant himself, Yatsuhashi Daichi, who really is the big softie that many of us imagined with the prior talk of him safeguarding Velvet in the past. He does have his moments of letting his emotions start to boil, but it makes him all the more charming as he tries to compose himself. I mean, the dude even felt sorry for cutting down a tree during his initiation, and he constantly tries to avoid his strength and size causing him and other people problems, hating the fact that he's viewed as a dumb giant, when really, he's just a big playful teddy bear deep down. Though there is an interesting, if not confusing element tied to his first meeting with Velvet during the initiation. Apparently there's a belief that all people from Mistral are anti-Faunus, and when Velvet first saw this big, intimidating looking guy from Mistral, she instantly assumed he was a racist, though this does get cleared up once the two actually talk. Now, I could be wrong about this, but this just felt weird to me, because you would have thought that stigma would be for Atlesians, with the whole Schnee Dust Company slavery deal going on, and even though we've had small clues about racism in Mistral being a thing, the lack of any on-screen racism during our time in Mistral outside of Cordovan made this a weird notion to accept without prior context. Even the now former headmaster of the academy was a Faunus, and we never saw Velvet feel this way about Pyrrha. So hearing that Kingdom has this apparent racist vibe about its people comes off as a tad strange, without any examples to back it up. Unless it was just a thought that Velvet alone has, and she personally viewed all Mistralians were racist due to her past abusive experiences. If that's the case, then it still comes off as rather confusing, Though I do greatly appreciate that while Yatsu does clear his name as not being a racist, he accepts that Velvet clearly has dealt with people from his kingdom who were, and he doesn't invalidate what she's gone through. That was a very respectful way to address the trials and tribulations of someone in Velvet's position, while still quickly building a bridge of respect and kindness that makes these two such a delightful duo in the book. I totally buy why Yatsu feels that he does want to protect Velvet, because he knows that she suffered and she wants to be treated with respect, which he gives to her. There's a good balance of give and take with these two. A shared level of respect, kinda like Coco and Fox, though with these two, they're more willing to be open with each other. Plus, I did find it cute that Yatsu will accept a punch whenever he does accidentally drop an insensitive Faunus quip. Though he can't help himself sometimes, like when he checks out Velvet's bum to see if she literally does have Grim on her tail, and when he does bunny ears behind her head to help a baby calm down. Something like that could come off as rude, but it's done for a light gag in the same vein as when Yang teased Blake with that laser pointer. You know there's no real malice going on there, and Yatsu, like I said, does feel like he has to make up for it. Now what I didn't expect with the big guy was the scary side to his semblance, which was revealed to be memory wiping, the power to completely wipe trivial memories from the last few seconds, or the ability to temporarily wipe larger memories that vanish for as long as the time span of the memory itself. Obviously, this is a power that can definitely be misused in the wrong hands, and that was the case with Yatsu, who was a problem child that abused that power to his own benefit, until one day, fueled by jealousy over the attention given to his baby sister Hiyoko and his rebellious nature, he made his mother forget that she had given birth to Hiyoko accidentally, and the reaction from his mother scared him to the point that he took care of his sister until the memory wipe stopped. That was a surprisingly dark bit of backstory to a semblance that I never expect to see with someone like Yatsu, but I absolutely loved it. The idea that semblances can be abused by youthful inexperience is something that I've always wondered about in the past, especially after seeing how Ren unlocked his semblance as a young kid. It's a curious detail that fits Yatsu's persona of the guy for lack of a better term, has great power, but needed to learn it comes with great responsibility. And now I'm picturing Yatsu dressed up like Spider-Man. Regardless, what a fantastic edge to give to a semblance and to a guy that most people do tend to overlook, and it caps off the tremendous new layers given to each coffee member. Again, I wish that there was more with Velvet's backstory, and a few details did come up with some confusion to it, but overall, Myers unquestionably succeeded in one of the book's biggest goals: make Team Coffee into multi-dimensional characters worth being invested in. And something that greatly helped the group's blossoming into stronger characters was one chapter that most readers will say is the standout part of the story: the long-awaited details of the team's mission during Volume 2. And yeah, it's pretty freaking great material. This isn't just a special chapter because it's finally detailing an unexplored event that fans have wanted to know more about. It's a roller coaster of emotions in just a handful of dark pages. I mean, we all kind of assumed things went bad when Team Coffee were gone longer than planned and came back looking crestfallen, but man, I was generally not prepared for what went down. Even beyond the painful thought of seeing Team Coffee, seeing the village of Lower Cairn laid to waste like it never existed, reading about the team's desperation to find any survivors and their stress building and building till it eventually led to the gruesome death of the only surviving family stunned me so much that I 100 and honestly genuinely had to put down the book and recollect myself. I applaud any book that can make me feel gobsmacked like that, especially with the heroes feeling responsible due to their built-up frustrations, fears, and inexperience. these four, who, when we first saw them fighting together for the first time, were untouchable badasses, suddenly felt very human. Morally crushed, even willing to fight on in some vain attempt to get some kind of positive out of this failure, but no, they did fail in the most brutal, unapologetic way, and it was captivating all the way through. Thankfully, they do end on an uplifting note that does take some advice from Ozpin and the group coming to Velvet's aid when they thought she was about to be punished to build the team back up again. But those scars do feel like they linger there, and that is fantastic. What a rush of emotions! And that wasn't even the real story of the book! No, that's where the Caspians, Edward and his grandson Gus, come in. Now, it's unmistakably obvious that these two, along with Carmine and Bertalik, are involved somehow in the mood bombs that affected the Tough Tribe. And while that could be a negative against the book, it gets brought up not long after, and we eventually learn that the real meat to the plot point is the trickery at play, with Edward pretending that he's the one responsible, when really, it's Gus, thanks to the kid's inability to control his semblance, a mood amplifier that greatly boosts any good or bad emotion the target is feeling. It was a good bait and switch that made me go, oh snap, once the lie was revealed, though I'm glad that Myers did make sure to still give us a reason to care about these two, and didn't just make them walking talking plot devices. Edward is this proud ex-huntsman who, despite his age and mental deterioration, wants to make sure that his grandchild is safe, while Gus, over the course of his book, gets away from his fear and distaste for huntsmen, builds self-confidence, and gains some hope that he can control his power one day, thanks to Velvet's encouragement. Plus, the whole thing about mood bombs is a great excuse for all the emotional twists and turns that we see with the characters, as well as masking certain things like Bertilak's heat semblance he controls, and isn't just the mood of the actual fights and arguments going on, making things intense. And speaking of Bertilak, you got him and Carmine, who, shock horror, are the book's bad guys. Yeah, I pretty much guessed that they were going to be the antagonists, even with the Caspians being shady in their own right, which does kinda lose the book some points, with the impact not hitting as hard as maybe it could have, especially with Coco's crush on Carmine, though there is a bit of a satisfying end to that. Still, the twosome based on the red and green knights of Arthurian lore do make like worthy knights and helm a pair of solid fights at the end of the book, in the midst of one of RWBY's most bonkers scenarios in its history, with their fights nestled in between the nomads trying to avoid the blind worm whilst on top of a freaking giant turtle. But yeah, an okay job as antagonists for these two, with really just the clear as day truths about their intentions being their big but only drawback. But there's still one last surprise that I didn't see coming, as the Team Coffee group reached their destination with the nomads to get to Coquina, in time to be reunited with Team Sun. That's right, Sun has indeed taken his boys to his home kingdom following his solo run with Blake in the main show. And just in time too, because it turns out we now know a sequel to After the Fall is on the horizon, with the Sun Boys joining Team Coffee to chase up Carmine and Bertilak's boss, who has been seeking strong semblances like Gus's for whatever schemes they have in mind. The only known information about his identity being their alias, the Crown. Two figures based on Arthurian legends working for a boss named after a crown. I wonder. And so, at last, those are my final thoughts on After the Fall. And well, if you couldn't tell by now, I absolutely loved it. The writing was on point when even balancing new and old characters, and having to cover a lot of new ground. The action was streamlined perfectly as well for novelization, barely missing a drop of RWBY's usual flair without the aid of animation and visuals. There's also plenty of emotions that will leave you beaming with smiles, laughing a few times, and feeling shocked with the surprises and dark turns. And while there are some fumbles with insight balancing, some obvious plot reveals, and some info confusion, what it excels at the most is making Team Coffee finally come off as characters that could fit in perfectly with their castmates in terms of making you care about their struggles and enjoy their achievements. Fans of the series, if you haven't bought this yet, what the hell is stopping you? It's easily the best side material for the series out there right now. And hey, if you're new to RWBY and you feel like giving this a go before checking out the animation, I'd say give it a shot. You would obviously miss out on some context and you will know about certain things ahead of time, but Myers did tremendously well to make sure that you can still enjoy a story rich in charm and emotions, no matter your prior experience. The future looks bright for RWBY's next attempts at some novelizations, with the first one all wrapped up and placed as a deserved part of the RWBY world. And with that sequel on the way, I'm hoping that there is more enthralling stories to be told just beyond the dawn. But until then, at least I can sit back and enjoy a nice bit of tasty coffee goodness. Woo, man, that was a trial to get out. I'm sorry it's taken so long. I've had a whole mess of issues taking away all my time with this, and I do hope that you enjoy this review. It was a tough time working on it, but compared to my usual episode reviews, I had fun doing a book review for a change. And hopefully the wait was still worth it. Don't forget to check out RWBY After the Fall yourself, as it is in most bookstores and RWBY's online store. And if you have checked it out already, be sure to leave your thoughts about it in the comments down below. While you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons to get every new video from me as they drop, and follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on future content, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.